My name is Maribel Huxley, and at 68, I have learned to smile through other people's comfort. Years in the art world taught me that silence often preserves more dignity than words ever could. Still, that lesson felt thin tonight. The restaurant shimmered with warm light, the kind meant to make money look effortless. I sat at the end of a long mahogany table, surrounded by my son's colleagues, men in tailored suits, women in diamond cuffs that caught every flicker of candlelight. Adrian had chosen the place himself, a new seafood restaurant overlooking Puget Sound, where even the water seemed to hold its breath for him. "Mom's been my biggest supporter," he said, flashing that easy grin he'd perfected for investors. Though she did chase me like a puppy when I started the firm, always calling, always needing updates. Laughter rippled around the table. One of his partners clapped him on the shoulder. "Persistent genes. Huh." I lifted my glass to hide the tremor in my hand. The wine was too sweet, or maybe my mouth had turned bitter. Adrian went on, describing how he'd taught his mother to let go, his voice bright with the cruelty of people who think their jokes are harmless. No one at that table knew the tuition checks I'd written, the down payment for his first condo, the gallery sponsorship that landed his firm its first client. They didn't know the hours I'd spent pretending I didn't mind when my name was quietly removed from his company's donor list. I smiled when I should have left. I nodded when I wanted to stand. When the laughter finally died down, I excused myself, my heels clicking against marble floors that smelled faintly of salt and money. Outside, the evening air bit colder than it should have. Across the bay, the city lights trembled on the water, small and constant, like something still alive after a storm. I stood there for a long moment, the sound of laughter still echoing behind the glass. Then I turned toward the parking lot, adjusting my coat, and promised myself that silence would serve me one last time until it didn't. And that was how the quiet began. The drive home wound uphill through Queen Anne, the streets slick with evening rain. My house waited at the top like an old friend who had stopped expecting company. The porch light glowed faintly over the brick steps, a habit I never broke even when no one came late anymore. Inside, the silence felt curated rooms arranged for comfort, but not conversation. The walls were lined with portraits and landscapes collected over a lifetime. Adrian used to love walking through them as a boy, naming colors like they were secrets. "That's Prussian blue, right?" "Mom," he'd ask, tugging my sleeve with paint still on his fingers from art class. He never noticed the canvases missing, now the ones I'd sold to cover his first investment round. I paused before a large oil painting near the stairwell. My late husband, Samuel, had painted it the year before he died, the back of a woman standing at a gallery window, her reflection softer than her posture. He said it reminded him of me. After he passed, I poured everything into keeping his gallery alive, the same one Adrian now used for client dinners. On the mantel stood a framed photo Adrian at 7, holding my hand outside that very gallery, grinning with his front teeth missing. I traced the edge of the glass. He'd clung to me so tightly that day I could barely turn the key in the door. The irony settled deep in my chest. I hadn't chased him. I'd cleared the path for him to run. The clock in the hallway chimed 9. I set down my coat, turned on the kettle, and let the sound fill the kitchen like company. Rain tapped against the window, steady and unbothered. In the reflection, I saw the same posture Samuel had painted the woman standing still while the world beyond her kept moving. When the water boiled, I poured it over the tea leaves and waited for the color to bloom. Tonight, the house felt like a museum, each frame and teacup cataloging what I'd given to build someone else's life. And somewhere between the ticking clock and the rain, something in me began to rearrange. The next morning began like most others, tea cooling beside an unopened newspaper. The city outside still wrapped in fog. I had planned to sort through storage invoices and old gallery receipts. Nothing more ambitious than keeping my records tidy. But habit led me to open the quarterly statement from the Huxley Foundation Trust. I skimmed the familiar columns until a note in the margin stopped me. Collateralized through Huxley Advisory Group for Venture Acquisition. The words looked harmless, but my pulse quickened. The trust was meant for charitable grants, not business leverage. My signature had never authorized anything of the sort. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Walter. It's Maribel. He laughed softly through the line. I thought retirement cured you of balance sheets. Apparently not. I explained what I'd found. Reading the notation verbatim, there was a pause, then the sound of keys clacking. Your name's still listed as guarantor, he said finally. Adrian must have filed it under the same foundation structure, technically legal but ethically questionable. I stared at the line of ink where my name appeared in the signature scan, dated 2 years ago. He'd used a general authorization form, one I'd signed for a different purpose. So what can I do? I asked quietly. You can revoke it whenever you choose, Walter said. One form, one signature, notarized. It would freeze his collateral access until a new guarantor steps in. The kettle whistled in the background, but I didn't move to pour. The room felt both smaller and clearer, as if the walls had shifted to make space for this new understanding. Thank you, Walter, I said. After we hung up, I folded the papers neatly and slipped them into a folder labeled Pending Review. For now, I would wait. Not out of fear, but because timing, like art, required composition. 2 days later, the doorbell rang just as I was trimming lavender in the kitchen window box. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Leonard Avery stood there older, slower, but still dressed like the art dealer he'd always been. A silk scarf tucked neatly into his coat despite the mild weather. Maribel, he said, his smile both familiar and cautious. You still answer your own door. I'm relieved. We hadn't spoken much since I closed Samuel's gallery, though he'd sent polite notes each Christmas. I led him into the sitting room where the morning light cut through dust like soft linen. He handed me a heavy envelope, gold embossed and perfumed faintly of expensive paper. It's an invitation, he said. Adrian's firm is hosting a gala at the Art Museum next month. 5 years of innovation. Apparently, they're using your trust as one of the event sponsors. Your name's printed right on the back cover. I felt the air shift. Slow and precise. The envelope was beautiful. My name written in calligraphy that looked more like ownership than honor. Why would they list the trust, I asked, already knowing? To lend weight, Leonard replied gently. Your reputation still opens doors in this city, especially the ones money alone can't. I traced the raised letters of my name. It glittered faintly in the sunlight. My first instinct was embarrassment, then something steadier recognition. He had borrowed more than funds this time. He had borrowed me. Leonard studied me over the rim of his glasses. Will you go? I looked toward the window where the lavender swayed in the breeze. I think I will, I said. It's been a while since I've seen my name in gold. He smiled, uncertain whether I was joking. After he left, I set the invitation on the piano beside Samuel's old metronome. The pendulum was still, but in its silence I could almost hear the first click of timing, the kind that divides hesitation from intent. The morning light fell soft across the tea table, turning the porcelain cups into small lamps of color. Sylvia Tran, 71 and still brisk in thought and movement, stirred honey into her cup as if considering how truth might best be sweetened before being served. I heard about the gala, she said without looking up. Leonard's name tends to travel faster than yours these days. I smiled faintly. He brought the invitation himself, said my name is sponsoring a future I didn't authorize. Sylvia set her spoon down. Then make sure your name tells the right story. Mercy doesn't mean surrender. Maribel, it means precision. Her words stayed with me long after she left. That afternoon, I drove downtown, the streets slick with drizzle. My lawyer, Claire Norris, greeted me without surprise. She'd known me through the quiet years, the patient widow with tidy books and no drama. We reviewed the trust documents in her glass-walled office. I signed the amendments carefully, transferring the remaining assets to a private foundation under my full control. The clauses were simple. My authorization could no longer be used as collateral or endorsement. The ink dried as easily as breath, but its meaning carried weight. "Would you like to notify your son?" Claire asked. "Not yet," I said. "Timing is an art, and I'd hate to waste the brushstroke back home." I ordered a gown from a small boutique on First Avenue, a dark navy silk. Modest in cut, but impossible to overlook up close. The kind of dress that spoke softly, but finished its sentences. Later that evening, I stood before the mirror, practicing a few lines aloud. My reflection looked calmer than I felt. "I only intend to clarify," I whispered. "Not accuse, not destroy. Outside." The rain began again, tracing silver threads down the window pane. I let the sound settle around me, steady and rhythmic, the way a heartbeat evens after anger fades. He had mistaken my quiet for dependence. That was his first lesson. The next would arrive wrapped in civility. The Seattle Art Museum glowed like a chandelier turned inside out, every surface reflecting wealth in practiced restraint. The Gala had the hum of expensive conversation, measured laughter, polished glass. The faint rustle of silk meant to sound effortless. I arrived just as the orchestra eased into its second piece, the navy gown falling perfectly against the cool marble floor. Adrian stood near the stage, tall and magnetic under the lights. He moved through the room like a man convinced he owned the air. When he saw me, his smile flickered just long enough to betray irritation, then returned. "Camera ready, Mother," he said, brushing a kiss against my cheek. "Didn't expect you'd brave the crowd." "I wouldn't have missed it," I replied. "It's quite an achievement." He laughed lightly, already turning toward a group of investors. "Humility runs in the family," he joked, raising his glass. "My mother taught me persistence. She never stops following up." The laughter that followed had the same tone as it did at that dinner weeks ago, too loud, too indulgent. But this time, I didn't flinch. I let my expression remain composed, serene enough to be unreadable. As I moved through the room, people greeted me with polite curiosity, the way one might approach a painting they'd heard about but never truly seen. A board member from the museum leaned toward me, his voice low. "Mrs. Huxley, your legacy really made this evening possible. The foundation's contribution was generous beyond measure." Legacy. The word landed like a slow spark. I smiled, acknowledging the compliment. Though it wasn't gratitude I felt. It was recognition, the faint click of scales tipping back toward balance. Across the ballroom, Adrian raised another toast, his voice carrying easily through the hum of chatter. I watched him, each word catalogued like a brushstroke in a portrait that would soon be finished. Around us, light fractured through crystal, breaking into thin, deliberate lines that shimmered against the walls. I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp against my tongue, and waited for the room to still long enough for truth to find its opening. Dinner had ended, and the orchestra softened into a patient hush as Adrian walked onto the stage. The spotlights followed him, catching the sheen of his cufflinks, the confidence in his stride. I could tell he had rehearsed this moment, each pause, each smile, every humble tilt of the head meant to charm the room into gratitude. 5 years ago, he began. I started with a vision and a small team that believed in me. Tonight is for them, and for those who made this journey possible. He gestured toward the audience, his tone rich with practiced warmth, especially my beloved mother, whose faith never wavered. Applause scattered politely. I felt the weight of 100 eyes turning toward me. Adrian's grin widened, and for a brief second, I saw the boy who once hid behind my skirt during museum openings. Then the man returned, the one who had used my name like a ladder rung. "Would you stand?" "Mother," he asked. "Let them see my greatest inspiration." The applause grew louder. I rose, the movement unhurried, the silk of my gown whispering against the floor. The microphone waited at the edge of the stage, unattended. I stepped forward. "Thank you," I said, my voice carrying easily through the quiet. "It's been a pleasure to watch this company grow." I glanced toward the sponsor's banner projected behind him. And yes, the gala is indeed underwritten by the Huxley Foundation. A trust I created, not borrowed. A ripple moved through the room, soft, uncertain. Adrian's smile faltered, his posture tightening as if the stage itself had shifted beneath him. "I'm proud to see how far my support has carried new talent," I continued, steady as breath. But support and ownership are not the same. Tonight, both are properly returned. Silence spread, heavy and deliberate. Then a single clap broke it. Leonard. From the back row, others followed, the sound growing, respectful but edged with curiosity. Adrian's eyes found mine, searching for anger. There was none, only composure, polished and final. The applause swelled until it filled the hall, the music resuming softly as I turned and walked back to my seat, the echo of my heels marking the end of a story I no longer needed to defend. The rain had started by the time I stepped outside, a thin silver mist softening the museum's glass facade. The air smelled of wet stone and champagne gone flat. Behind me, the murmur of guests spilled into the night, half applause, half confusion. Flashbulbs flared against the windows, catching fragments of my reflection each time the door swung open. Adrian found me near the valet line, his bow tie undone, his expression stripped of polish. "You've ruined me," he said, the words low and trembling. "Do you have any idea what that looked like in there?" I turned toward him, the rain sliding down my hairline, gathering at my collar. His voice was the same one that had once called me Mom, in small, frightened syllables. I waited until the echoes of cameras died down before answering. "No, Adrian," I said quietly. "I haven't ruined you. I've reminded them who paid for the walls you stand under." He opened his mouth, but no words followed. The valet brought my car forward, headlights cutting through the drizzle. I handed over the ticket and slid into the driver's seat without looking back. The city stretched along the waterfront, its lights bending and blurring across the wet pavement. Wipers swept rhythmically, steady as breath. Somewhere between the harbor and Queen Anne Hill, a voice from memory rose, Samuel's, soft as the hum of a gallery before opening night. "Grace, my love, is still a weapon when held steady." I slowed near the overlook where he and I once stopped for coffee after long exhibitions. The same skyline shimmered below, familiar yet changed. I parked for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, feeling neither triumph nor regret, only stillness. The rain eased into mist, and the city lights steadied in the glass. I exhaled, letting the last applause fade into memory, and drove on toward home. By morning, the city was humming with the quiet ferocity of gossip. My phone lit up with notifications, messages from acquaintances, board members, even distant relatives, all forwarding the same link. Huxley Foundation clarifies ownership structure. Founder's statement draws praise for transparency. I didn't read beyond the headline. The truth had already done its work. The doorbell rang just after noon. Adrian stood on the porch, eyes shadowed. Suit rumpled in a way that made him look younger and smaller than he had on stage. He carried no flowers this time, only a folded newspaper. "They're pulling out," he said without greeting. "The investors. They said they can't trust the firm's stability after last night." I motioned him inside, though the air between us felt formal, like a contract nearing expiration. "Sit," I said. He didn't. I didn't mean to. He stopped, words tripping on pride. "I just wanted people to know how far we'd come." "How far you came," I corrected gently. I reached into the side drawer of the writing desk and took out a small envelope, cream paper, my signature across the flap. Inside was a check, the exact amount left from the initial seed money I'd once given him, adjusted for inflation and nothing more. "This is yours," I said. "A clean severance. You may rebuild, Adrian, but not on my name again." He stared at it, confusion mixing with disbelief. "You're cutting me off." "No," I said softly. "I'm releasing you." He left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, the kind of sound that ends an echo. By evening, I was standing in a narrow storefront on Ballard Avenue, the dust motes turning gold in the slanted light. The old gallery sign had been cleaned, the paint retouched to reveal a single word: Maribel. The space smelled faintly of varnish and beginnings. I unlocked the window latch, letting the cool air in, and for the first time in years, it felt like the house of portraits might finally belong to the woman who had once painted its frame. 3 weeks passed before I stepped into a gallery again. The spring air carried a hint of salt from Elliott Bay, the kind of breeze that smelled faintly of beginnings. The exhibit was titled Reflections in Motion, a collection of portraits that used glass and shadow to capture what people hide between versions of themselves. Near the center hung a photograph that stilled me completely. It showed a woman framed by a window pane, city lights behind her, expression calm but unyielding. The reflection in the glass softened her outline, almost blending her into the world she observed. It took me a full minute to recognize the subject me, taken at the Gala, captured through the museum's exterior glass. Someone had caught the moment I walked out. "Haunting, isn't it?" came a voice beside me. I turned to find Leonard Avery, hands tucked neatly into his coat pockets, his smile gentle. "You didn't destroy him, Maribel. You just restored perspective." I studied the image again, the stillness, the control, perspective. I echoed, "That's all it ever was." We wandered the exhibit in silence until the lights dimmed for closing. As we reached the exit, Leonard paused. "Will you show again?" "Under your name already, I said. "Ballard Avenue, quiet place. But the light's good." Back home, the evening settled softly. I moved through the living room, stopping at Samuel's portrait above the mantel. His painted gaze, warm and knowing, met mine through years of varnish and memory. I unclasped the thin bracelet I'd worn at the Gala, the one that had once symbolized appearance more than meaning, and set it beside his frame. The metal caught the lamplight, a small arc of gold against old wood and glass. "Mercy isn't forgetting," I murmured, my reflection faint beside his. "It's remembering who you were before apology was expected." Outside, the city lights flickered across the bay like brushstrokes on dark water. The house was quiet, but not empty. It no longer waited for anyone's return.